When he did not drive, he asked my paternal grandfather to drive him to see his biological father in Jonesboro, Tennessee. His father was Nathan Jackson. So as I traced the Jackson line on back, my Jackson ancestor's brother in the deposition in the court case verified that his grandfather was actually a son of Lloyd Ford, deceased, who had left the will. So on my direct mail line, I actually go back to Lloyd Ford, who left the will. The Jackson's mother, Augusta, was a Ford. She turned out to be a brother to William Ford, who was Papa's ancestor on his mother's side. So James, the executor, is my ancestor twice. And the father of my Jackson ancestors most likely was Lloyd III, who was evidently chased his father to have that will burned back to the Hale house, because several depositions verified that the Jacksons said Lloyd Ford was supposed to be their father, even though my deposition didn't name who the gentleman was. So anyway, that's my background. Thoroughbred Ford, inbred Ford, however you want to look at it. I'm also the administrator of the Ford Family Surname Project with Family Tree DNA, which I got involved with early on because after two surname changes, when I heard about the Thomas Jefferson-Sally Hemings debate about proving whether the African-American descendants of Sally Hemings were really Jeffersons, and found out they had been able to take a Y-DNA test and establish that those were indeed Jeffersons, I wanted to do the same to see if my research was correct. So early on I tested and found out, sure enough, I am genetically a Ford. The first administrator of the project was not interested too much in grouping people and showing different family connections by matches. So I volunteered my services, and since then he has determined that genetically he's actually not a Ford, so he stepped aside. So I've been asked this morning to do a quick presentation about DNA. Evidently, many of you have expressed some interest to one another about DNA and how to use it in your research. The first thing I would say then, based on just the experiences I've just told you, if you don't want to know the truth, don't test your DNA. However, if you're more concerned with what's actually the truth, no matter what you may find, I say jump in the deep end, go for it. There are three main types of DNA testing. The simplest and most straightforward for research purposes is a Y-DNA test, which tests a male based on DNA he inherits from his father, who got it from his father, who got it from his father. So it's very easy to determine where this DNA came from, as long as your genealogy tree is correct. So, if any males are interested in their Ford families, they encourage you to do the Y-DNA test. We have quite a few descendants of the colonial Maryland Fords, and quite a few descendants of Lloyd Ford have actually been able to determine his baseline Y-DNA signature, and we can tell you whether genetically you are traced back to these early Fords and whether your paper trail is correct by a Y-DNA test. To do that, different companies used to offer that test. The early one, Family Tree DNA, is still around. The others have largely closed down their Y-DNA testing, except for paternity testing and stuff. So I would encourage you to go to Family Tree DNA. You'll find my name on the Ford Surname Project, and I'll be happy to help you. Another piece of DNA, which is fairly straightforward because it comes from the mother and her mother and her mother and her mother, actually males and females have it, is mitochondrial DNA. So if you're interested in tracing back to some of the early African American Fords, for instance, Lloyd had two, he had a slave Peg and a slave Edie. And if you happen to descend on a direct female line, you can trace your DNA back to her and perhaps find cousins related through your females. However, females tend to be harder genealogically to trace, so it's not quite as easy sometimes as the Y-DNA test. And finally, there is a type that anybody can take, whether you're a direct male descendant, direct female descendant, or whether you went through father, mother, father, mother, father, mother, all the way back. It's called an autosomal DNA test. Several companies offer that test. The most popular, probably Ancestry.com. Everybody hears about it on TV advertisements, so it has actually a huge database of testees. There are already 126 people in just the Lloyd Ford of the Wills DNA circle on Ancestry. Family Tree DNA also offers an autosomal test, 23andMe and MyHeritage.com, as well as others. You could go for the cheapest test when they run a sale if you're interested in doing that, and this is also the test that will try to tell you your ethnicity, how much percent you are from certain parts of the world, sub-Saharan African, different parts of Africa, Western European. The science is still in development. Every year it changes. Your ethnicity estimates might change, but a lot of people do it just for that reason, and that's one reason the database is so good. So you might end up helping someone with their family tree who you match, who might not be as interested in testing, but can give you some additional genealogical information if you just can figure out how they're related. My druthers would be that you test through Ancestry.com, just because it will put you in the DNA circles based on your matches and your family tree, and it's easy to find people who are descended from the same couple. However, Ancestry.com does not offer the tools that we really need in some cases to scientifically show this DNA came from this particular person and that 2 or 3 people actually inherited the same piece of DNA from that ancestor, for instance, from Lloyd Ford. So once you test with one of these companies, I would encourage you to please download your results and upload to a free site called GEDmatch. It's at gedmatch.com, GEDMATCH. And from there, you can access a chromosome browser. FTDNA, Family Tree DNA, also has a chromosome browser. 23andMe has a chromosome browser. But even if you test with Ancestry, you can upload your results to this site, and you can actually see little segments of DNA that you share with another person. And if you can find 2 other people descended from 2 different children of the same couple, we call this triangulation. You can say, bam, here's this little piece on my chromosome 3. I got that from Lloyd Ford or from his wife or from Edie or Peg or whomever. I would like to say, too, that even if some of these freed slaves were not descendants of Lloyd Ford, we have clues to other families that they should match and to other possible parents that were listed in some of the depositions in the trials and the retrials. And there was actually a later case that I'm guessing stems from that letter to T.A.R. Nelson in 1855, I think you said. Grant Ford came back from Kentucky and tried to initiate another case, which he also lost. But I can just imagine the African Americans who were still here trembling in fear because they were trying to re-enslave these people who had finally, after trial, had finally won their freedom. But there are further depositions in that case, and I've been able to use some of those to identify who some of the female freed slaves married into and some of their children. So a lot of them are not just Fords and probably have no idea that we could actually help them establish African American history back to the 1700s through our Ford family court cases and records. there are probably three main descendants of, they're actually all through Edie. Again, Lloyd had another slave, Peg. Both Edie and Peg had died before the court case. They never got to obtain their freedom, but Peg had a son, Jack, who was a prominent fellow, very well thought of in Jonesboro, and he was one that when Lloyd would visit Jonesboro, he would visit Jack, who was making him good money there, I think, and he would take him to do his trades at the store, and he had good connections there and stuff. Jack, however, as far as I can tell, died, and as far as I know, he did not have a family. So Edie, however, had 4 children. Larkin Sr., he married Lucretia Fitzgerald. They had 8 children. Peggy, her partner was a Hall. She had 7 children. Rhoda, her partner was Joe Ford, who belonged to Grant Ford, another of the Fords, so they may actually be double Fords or one or the other. They had 6 or 7 children. And then there was Ned, who was named in the case. His wife was Betsy, but so far I haven't been able to find that they had any children. But even just from the ones that I found, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of African American descendants. And through autosomal DNA, hopefully we can tie these families together. For instance, the descendants of Larkins would have Fitzgerald connections. The descendants of granddaughter Edie would have Ryan family connections, etc. And if you can match up the little segments through triangulation, we can establish were these Fords, were these some of the other names. Leroy Hale was another possibility for Larkin's father. Jack's daddy was said to be George Flynn from Jonesboro. Anyway, there are different other clues, even if we don't figure out that that Lloyd Ford was a father, or like I say, this is for people open to whatever the truth is. I think a lot of us would like to know, and like the t-shirt says, it doesn't matter what it's, how it comes out. Culturally, we're all Fords, are part of the same family, even if you're a Jackson Strickler Ford or whatever.